All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson, a saga of Churchill, family, and defiance during the Blitz. Erik Larson is the author of some of my favorite nonfiction books, like, for instance, The Devil in the White City. If you've ever read that, it's just one of the best nonfiction books in the world. So anyway, I've been rereading for the past month or so, just maybe 20 to 50 pages a night. I've been rereading the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and it just seems to be a suffocating read. I mean, this is the third time I've read this book, Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and I'm just being suffocated under Nazism with rereading this, and I'm like, I needed to jump into a book that talks more about sort of the good and noble characters of World War II, if that's what it was. So I picked this one about Churchill anyway. So this book takes place over the course of a year, May 10th of 1940 to May 10th of 1941. I will read one sentence out of the author's introduction because, and it is, "This was the year in which Churchill became Churchill, the cigar-smoking bulldog we all think we know, when he made the greatest speeches and showed the world what courage and leadership looked like." Yeah, Churchill was integral in stopping the Nazi advance throughout Europe, and especially up into England, and, with the help of the Russians and the United States, we defeated Hitler and his Third Reich. One of the reasons that Erik Larson decided to write this book, in his introduction, he also mentions, he was thinking back on 9/11, when America was attacked, and that was kind of like bunch of planes, 4 planes crash landing into significant buildings and whatnot. And it was almost like we were being bombed at the time. And he thought about 9/11, the author did, and he thought, well, gosh, London was bombed by the Nazis during World War II, and it was bombed a lot. I mean, 45,000 or more citizens in Britain lost their lives due to these bombings, and it must have been horrible. And how did the leaders of that country rally their country and keep their country spirits up, despite knowing that Hitler might invade at any moment, and Hitler was already bombing the place. So this is about Churchill's first year as the leader of Great Britain. Now, we learn early on in the book that he wants to get the help of the United States to join the war. And one of the things is there's a quote in there and this is a quote directly from the book. Churchill, this is, okay, I should, so quote, I'm going to start with the quote. Quote, Churchill, why can't I do the quote right? America and Roosevelt's help to stave off Hitler and Hitler's National Socialism. That was kind of the mantra of Churchill's first year. We need America and President Roosevelt's help to stave off Hitler and Hitler's National Socialism. Those are in quotes from the book. And this then becomes an epic saga of England under attack through the eyes of Churchill and his children. So it's kind of a unique perspective as we get to know Mary, his daughter, Randolph, his son. We get to see the bombing through their eyes and the blackouts, because once the bombing started, they'd have blackouts in England. So they'd turn off the lights and all the electricity so the bombers couldn't see where the cities were in the dark. And then we had, but then they would start to bomb on nights where there were a full moon, because then they didn't really need the lights of the city. They could see. That's why we get the term bomber's moon. It's not a real famous term, but I've heard it. because, you know, the bombers would go at night when the full moon was out and they could see where to bomb. And the destruction of the cities was terrible. And the author goes into great detail on just how horrific it was, how brutal and bloody, and just how much fear people felt every night when they thought they may or may not get bombed, because they knew what it was going to be like. And then within that first year, there's the bombings, there's the blackouts, there's also Dunkirk. If you saw that movie, that whole episode takes place. Now, Churchill, the whole time, is trying to convince Roosevelt and America to join the war. Now, Churchill's strength was that he really did in that first year teach the Brits how to be fearless in the face of horror and fight to the end. And a lot of these scenes, and this is like an interesting book because it actually reads kind of like a novel. In fact, as I was reading it, I was like, this really is comparable to one of those Ken Follett World War II historical novels that I love so much, in that a lot of this is dialogue. It's like a lot of it reads like characters talking back and forth. And we get this perspective of these bombings and everything through, and the war, and we get to go to each place that kind of Churchill called home during this. You know, we've got his, it's set in Churchill's country home called Chequers. It's also set in his wartime retreat called Dickley. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Dickley. Anyway, and then 10 Downing Street in London, we get a lot of stuff there. It's not just a war saga of Churchill keeping Britain kind of in a good mood during wartime, but it's a war saga of his family, the drama, the melodrama of his family, all the happiness, betrayal, and heartache his own family goes through during this time, because, you know, there's, you know, his daughters and son, they have marriages that don't necessarily always work out, and things are just this. Not only is it war, but just because there's a war going on, we find out the people still are people. They're still falling in love. They're still falling out of love. They're still kind of like cheating on each other. They still do all the human things that humans do, even though it's war. And I really kind of liked that Erikson dialed it into that specific family, rather than just do an overview, because we do get chapters that are like overviews of the bombing and what's going on with Hitler and you know, all of his cronies. But most of it's just this nitty gritty family life of Churchill and how these things are affecting him personally. I liked the book, but then again, Erik Larson's one of my favorite nonfiction writers. If not, well, him and John Krakauer, probably my favorites. You know, anyway, I'm giving this a solid 10 out of 10. I mean, you can't miss with Erik Larson. You just can't. Oh, and did I tell you? I wonder if this is one of them ones that he signed. I have met the guy. No, this isn't one that he signed. He signed most of my books. But anyway, there you go.